Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast with me, Craig Lewis. This is the podcast where we like to tell the extraordinary stories of everyday runners. And today we have a fantastic guest in Terrell Johnson. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Terrell in a minute, but first of all, hold on for a second. Go and take a little bit of time out, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, tell your best friend about what we do here at Running Tales, and get loads and loads of other people to come and listen to the podcast and to read our Substack, which you can find at runningtales.substack.com. Now, anything else you want to know about us, you can find there. I'm not going to go on and on about it now because I've got Terrell to talk about, and Terrell is Substack running royalty. His Substack, the Half Marathoner, has more than 39,000 subscribers. I can only dream about that for Running Tales. He's a long time runner. He completed his first few marathons back in his mid-20s, and he says he's run lots of other distance races too. But it was as he headed into his 30s that he discovered what's become the love of his life, the half marathon. And he went to the point, actually, where when he couldn't find any comprehensive guides about them himself, he created his own, a website that he called the Half Marathon Guide. And actually, it became the world's leading resource for runners looking to run that 13.1 mile distance. So incredible to have dreamed that and then made it into reality. A few years later, the newsletter came along, and it's an eclectic mix, really. It has that half marathon stuff in there, as well as all sorts of other things along the lines of other people's stories, Terrell's own experiences, and well, loads of stuff. Let's get Terrell on and we can ask him all about it. Actually, that's probably the best to go. So hi, Terrell, and welcome to Running Tales.
Hi, Craig. Hi. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
No worries, you're welcome. Well, I think maybe we go back to the start of your running story, and we mentioned there that you did a lot of running in your in your twenties, but
Mhm.
did it start any younger than that? Were you a runner at school or?
No, never, never. I was not athletic as a kid. I played like the regular recreational league sports,
Yeah,
soccer, a season or two of basketball, a season of baseball, but never really, other than running in PE class, had never really run in maybe a handful of jogs when I was in college. It wasn't really until I was about 24, 25 years old that I really took up running in any sort of consistent, sustained way. And just happened to live near a park that had an almost 2 mile loop. And I had a job where I got off work every day at like 4:30. I was 24 years old, 25. And I was like, when you're single and you're young, you have a lot of time on your hands. So I
yeah.
was like, well, I'll just sort of take it up, I'll just do this. And then a friend of mine said, there's this really famous 10K here in Atlanta called the Peachtree Road Race. And it's 50,000 people on the streets of Atlanta. And he was like, let's all do this as a group, all of our group of friends. And so that's sort of the first time, okay, I'm going to run a real 6.2 mile distance here. That was the
Yeah.
first time of any like more than just a mile or, 2 or 3 miles that I'd ever run.
Yeah, I'm intrigued actually because you would have spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of runners when you're running through the Substack and everything else you've done. Something I've come across quite a lot is people saying exactly what you did. I wasn't really sporty at school. I didn't really get into running. I found it later. Uh, I just wonder if you've got any theories. Obviously, you're in the States and I'm in the UK,
Yeah.
but it
Right.
does seem to be a worldwide thing of why doesn't running grab people when we're younger and at
Oh,
school?
I'll tell you what. Well, this is at least what my experience was running in gym class. I was
Yeah.
not always near the end. I was always, among the last people to finish whatever the laps we had to do. And I think that imprints on you when you're young and you feel
Mm.
like, first of all, running is a drag. It's laborious. I'm just sweating and panting here,
Yeah.
and I'm not having a lot of fun because my classmates are so far ahead of me. There's no way I can ever catch up to that. So I don't want to do this. I think that's what probably goes through a lot of young people's heads. And it's different now. Like now, the running world is so much more visible in the sense of famous runners or people on Instagram you can follow. There was Runner's World back then, but it was brand new. And that was really very a niche, thing. It was mainly men. competing in
Mm.
marathons in cities. There were, yes, the 10Ks and 5Ks, but they weren't nearly as many of them as there are now. So I think in that world, we just couldn't even see that world back then. We had no visibility into it. And our personal experience was so bad that it leaves an impression. And then it's like when you're in your 20s, or when you're an adult, hey, it's a way to stay in shape. It's a way to do something with friends. And so then that becomes more appealing. You sort of, oh, there's this other side to it.
Yeah, definitely. And how did those first runs, that first race go for you?
Oh, it was so much fun. We had an absolute blast because the Peachtree Road Race is not the kind of road race anybody runs except for the elites who are, start an hour before you do.
Yeah.
But it's just fun. It's on the 4th of July here every year. So it's hot and you're people are out there spraying runners with beer, offering you donuts, all that sort of thing. And we ran it as a group together. So we would turn around and run it backwards for a while. Then we would turn back around. I think I ate a giant donut when we ran past this grocery store called Publix, which is on Peachtree Street,
Yeah.
and just had a ball. It was so much fun.
Oh,
And then
I
did it
have,
again for a few years after that with that same group.
yeah, I quite often, and I'm sure you have the same, have people say, "How can you get into running?" I think if I spoke to them about beer and donuts, it'd it'd
Right.
encourage them a lot quicker, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
And you obviously went on there to do a lot more races and to do
Yeah.
marathons as well.
I think because I'd run, it's funny. It's how one thing leads to another. So ran the Peachtree, and then that sort of gives you sort of like that kind of unlocks something. Okay, I
Mm.
did that, so I can do this. Whereas before, if my friend hadn't encouraged us and said we're all going to do this, I don't know if I ever even would have tried it. So then I had another friend who was running a full marathon, like 26 miles, and it was the kind of thing where it was you raise money and they pay for you to go. We In our case it was Bermuda, and so they would pay for our hotel room and our flight, and all we had to do was raise a certain amount of money, which in our case was $2,500, and they would just take care of it all. And then they also had a group for us to train with coaches and everything. So I was like, okay. I mean, if you're talking as opposed to if I was going to do that on my own, I think I would have quit
Yeah.
long before I ever got to the race. But because we had that kind of structure around, and so it had that pull of like, oh, there's this group of people I can run with on the weekends, and they can kind of tell me what I need to be doing, and that's kind of cool. And so I won't just be on my own doing this. And we get to do this really cool thing, get to go to Bermuda, this place I'd never
Mm.
been, and that was awesome.
Oh, what an incredible first marathon
Yeah,
experience! And
right. Yeah.
did having a bit of coaching and stuff along the way mean that you managed to avoid some of those horrible first time marathon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they gave us a plan, we stuck to that plan, and they were just like, you just make sure you do the runs in the middle of the week when we're not together, and we will go. And they would like literally run alongside us, so not literally the entire long run, but every long run, the coaches would sort of go to different groups that
Mm.
were out there and give us little pep talks, tell us what we're doing, just sort of give us little tips on our pace, or you don't have to run so fast, or that sort of thing. Just all those little, especially if you've never done it before. That was for me like, okay, I really need. And then once you do it once, you can figure it out. But to having it, especially for that first time, because it's such a escalation from especially the mileage level
Yeah.
where I had ever run before. And you don't know, your body can do it, but you don't think you can do it. And it's like you really have to prove it to yourself that you can do it.
Mm.
And then you start to see, you go on a long run, you're like, I actually finished this. I actually ran 10 miles. I actually ran 12 miles. Maybe I can do this, and it sort of dawns
Yeah.
on you mentally. You're like, oh, okay. Yeah.
I think it's such a funny distance because you have a mixture of exactly what you've been talking about then, but also maybe this is just me, but I did a lot of half marathons. They were never easy, but I could
Yes.
comfortably enough do a half marathon. And I just sort of
Mhm.
thought, well, it's just two half marathons. What's the
Right.
problem?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not just two half marathons. It's this horrendous thing that is so much harder than that, and it just
Okay.
it crept up on me.
Yeah, a funny thing for the Bermuda race, because of where we were, they ran a 13-mile loop twice through the city called Hamilton, which is sort of the capital of Bermuda.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be running 13, and I could hear somebody had a radio on the side. They were announcing the winner. And I'm like, that person ran two loops in the time it took me to
Oh,
run one. It's
yeah.
like, and then because this was not a big race, this is like 800 to 1,000 runners total, compared to some, 20,000 like in New
Mm.
York City or something like that. So it was funny. And another thing was funny. They put our names in numbers, bib numbers in the newspaper, the Bermuda Sun newspaper. And so when we were running through these little neighborhoods in just outside Hamilton, people would say our names. We were like,
Right.
how do you know our names? you
Oh,
know?
that's some investment from the spectators
Right,
to
exactly.
keep a list
Yeah.
of the names and check them. Oh, that's really cool.
Right. Yeah. It was funny. You're like, how could they possibly know my name?
And did part of your journey then end up, well, obviously more marathons, but did you end up
Mhm.
taking in on some of those big city marathons as well?
I did. I did Washington, D.C., the Marine Corps Marathon,
Yeah.
which is actually the year after that Bermuda one. It was either 1 or 2 years later. And then one in San Diego with another friend of mine. And that was one where I probably overestimated my fitness level and didn't train quite as hard as I should have. But I was doing it again with a couple of, well, really just one other friend. But we would each train individually, on our own. I don't even think we met up for long runs. We would sort of talk about it, but that having that group really, for me, was essential in keeping me honest, keeping me consistent, and doing it on your own is really hard, especially when you're working
Mm.
and in a city like where we live, Atlanta, it's lots of traffic. Um, if we were a smaller place with more accessible places to run, it's a different story, but it also can get really hot here. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that was what I found.
Definitely. At that stage,
Hmm.
obviously you're getting into running, you're doing marathons, so
Hmm.
you're in the game as it were. But did you ever sort of imagine at that point that it would become such a central and long lasting part of your life
No,
and what you do?
no, no, I never did. It's funny. Like I started my half marathon site. It was a few years after my last full marathon, because I did still continue having interest in running and still would do like Peachtree Road Race with friends.
Mm.
But I mean, I think especially that last marathon, because it was so difficult, because I didn't train as much or train as hard as I had for the first one, that I think I was sort of like done with the marathon distance
Yeah.
for a while. It's just it's such a commitment, and I just happened to discover the halves, and I was like, and I remember going, Atlanta had its first, now it's an annual race, but it was the first running of this race. And this was in the time when you would go to pick up your bib at the race expo, and there'd be like a big sort of message board there with like sheets of paper. And so they had the numbers, names and numbers of people running this race and that race, the 10K, the 5K, whatever. And they had the marathon, and it was say like 2 or 3 sheets of paper. Then the half marathon, it was like 7 or 8 sheets of paper. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. There's a lot more people running this one than there are, for obvious reasons. It's half the distance.
Yeah.
um, and so that's when sort of I got turned on to that. And I was
It's
like, oh,
quite
I don't, yeah.
so sorry, go on.
No, I don't feel so like when especially that third marathon in San Diego. I remember going back to the hotel room and just crashing for like 6 hours. I was only like 29 or 30 years old at the time, but I was like, I'm really beat. It's a 26 miles is such a long way on the roads. And so I think the fact that you're not so it's just such a much more manageable distance. The half that appealed to me.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I know a lot of people who really love
Mhm.
the halves as a cool distance.
Yeah.
I, I'm just thinking, listening to some of what you're saying there and what you're saying earlier about things like Runner's World and so on not being so big and having to
Mhm.
look around to find these half marathons, and we'll get perhaps into how it was quite hard for you to find them.
Mhm.
But for some of our perhaps younger listeners, they might this might sound quite alien to them because
Yeah.
now with the internet and everything else and so many races, it's not hard to find a half marathon or indeed any event
Right.
these days. But it was very different, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, basically, and I remember talking to a race director once about this. It's your really just your local people who would come out and say run a race every year. And it was really probably in the 2000s, though I'm sure there was some of this because we had traveled to Bermuda and I traveled to DC and
Yeah,
to San Diego. But um, I think that became a really big thing once it became easier to find races and that you people in other cities could see what when they were, that becomes a much bigger deal in terms of like there's this big running boom in the early sort of 2000s and 2010s because of they're just easier to find. When I tried it, it's just Googling, and there was like some local running organizations here in Georgia. What a lot of the case was is there's all these running clubs in all
yeah,
these different cities, and they would have local races listed on them because they each had their own website. Now they would have a Facebook page or an Instagram account or whatever, but back then they all had their own websites. And so that's just what I did. Well, I was like, well, how could I put all this together? Um, it was basically all that little starting from screen, each one of these one by one and just putting them on web pages and listing them that way.
yeah, yeah. No, I am intrigued by that. My father-in-law was a big runner, and over here in the UK, the thing that he said was that when you turn up at races, it was club runners. It was literally all
Yeah,
club runners. You didn't
right.
really have, like you do now, hundreds and thousands of people turn up who are just casual runners.
Right. Yeah. And people make a thing of it. And you can see the big cities. I remember running San Francisco half, and that's a place where you can see, okay, we can make the whole weekend of it.
Mm,
And, but yeah, there's all kinds of, and I wonder too, like the effects of this world marathon. I'm fascinated by the world marathon majors. And I wrote about this in the newsletter a week or two ago because the marathon was sort of on the decline in the sense of participation numbers had been declining for several years to the point that cities like Atlanta, which used to have one on Thanksgiving Day, can't you just reduce it, got rid of the marathon, just kept it as the half. A number of other cities got rid of their marathons, but now to get into these world marathon majors, people need to run marathons, to get certain times. And
yeah.
so I wonder, like, I think that the marathon has sort of begun to rise again.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I mean, I'm not
Mhm.
over here. I think it might be slightly different. It seems to be we almost seem to have a bit of a marathon boom. I mean, London is growing and growing and
Oh,
growing, probably to points where it's almost too big for itself because it's so
yeah.
crowded. And I think that's probably the same from what I've heard with New York as well to a degree. But
Mhm.
yeah, we've got lots of marathons, and we seem to have people who are quite obsessed with becoming members of
Yeah.
these 100 marathon clubs and things like that, and they'll do
Oh, wow.
two
Yeah.
marathons or a weekend or 10 in a row. So
Yeah.
it's
That's
yeah, it's
nuts.
definitely popular here. But the marathon majors, the biggest thing I hear about them is from people who'd sort of completed them and now suddenly find they've got another two to go or whatever because they
Oh,
keep
really? Oh,
adding
right. Because they
stuff
keep
to it.
adding them. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think originally they were five and now there's seven. Is that right? I think. Yeah.
Something like that. I can't remember if it was yeah, it's either five or seven or six and now eight. But yeah, they
Yeah.
added
Yeah. It could be more. Right.
they added Sydney, didn't they? And I think they're adding
Mhm.
some others. But yeah, it's certainly growing and growing and growing
Yeah.
as a thing that um, when you were looking for these half marathons and doing these half
Mhm.
marathons, what do you remember the point where you thought I'm going to create this
Oh,
resource?
yes. And it was completely so. This is not going to be very inspirational, but the very first thing that gave me the idea to do this was an article I saw in the Washington Post about Google's AdSense. And that if you had a website and you put Google ads, which is back then they were just text ads,
Yeah,
that Google would pay you. So I thought to myself, I knew HTML because I'd had a job previously before that where I worked as a content developer. And I was like, I think I could do this, I was like, but however, what would I do a website about? So I thought to myself, well, I've run a few marathons. run a few other distance races. I know some things about running. Um, maybe I could do that. And so I looked around. There was already a site called Marathon Guide. And I was like, well, what about the half? So that domain name was available.
Mm.
I bought it for like $30. And now I was like, okay, now what? Now what do I do? So I thought to myself, well, I knew that for Google, you can't just have a page. You've got to have content that Google finds worth surfacing. And so I decided to write these descriptions of the races and include maps and calendars and city listings and things like that. And so it just sort of grew over time and then people started using it more, and it started coming up and higher in Google search results, to the point where it was the number one result for many, many different half marathon related and running related search terms.
Mm.
And I remember there was one time, San Francisco doesn't have it now, but San Francisco had the Nike women's, I think it was Nike women's half marathon, which is a big, big race. And for whatever reason, my site would outrank Nike's website for that search term. And so the traffic would just go into the stratosphere for like that
Yeah.
whole weekend. And then it would come back down like on Monday. um, but that was sort of showed me the power of this stuff, and like what people are searching for and what people are interested in. And so I just kept tinkering with it and building it, and over the responses I would get from people, that sort of is that constant interplay with the audience. And that was just a fascinating thing. I remember one time running this post, because keeping up with these maps and these course changes was so hard. I posted this blog post on the homepage once, and I was like, would you mind if I just stopped doing this? And they were like, no, you've got to keep doing it. What it was just like 40 comments below it. And I was like, wow, that really tells me something. Okay, this really matters to people. This is useful. And I can't stop doing this. I've got to keep doing this, no matter how much work it takes. So I did.
Well, that's something which is it really shows up within the half marathoner, is the chat function that you have and the conversations you have with your audience. Because I know quite a lot of people, probably myself included, who find it quite hard to get a community going in that chat function. But it's something you've absolutely nailed, I think.
Well, thank you. I mean, that to me is the fun. I started doing Substack, which is I've been on the entire time. I remember when I first started, it was just an email, and then there was comment functionality underneath your post, but it was really I'd been on there roughly a year, and then they started this what do they call it, threads functionality, so you could
Yeah.
just send out a thread prompt instead of just a whole post. And so I was like, that's interesting. And I asked them if they could turn that on, because it was just brand new for only a couple of newsletters. And they did. And so I just started messing around with it and doing it on Fridays. And that was in sort of mid 2019 ish. And it was just amazing, just the responses it would get. Just any sort of running related question I would ask people about their running form. Do they think about the running form, the shoes, watches, the music they run to, just anything that could pop in my head. And just the response, it blew me away. And it just taught to me, running to me, it's obviously a solitary sport in one way,
Mm.
but it's very communal in another way. And there's it's better when we do it together, and we do it. There's obviously running clubs all over, and there's Park Run where you live, and it's here in the United States some as well. But I think it's such a great way to bring people together. And I want, people don't really have swimming clubs. They do have biking clubs. People do cycle together, but it's such it breeds conversation.
Mm.
It breeds connection. And so I've tried to sort of capture, and that's what it was for me too. Like when all these years ago when I trained for that first marathon, like I'm describing to you earlier, that was what it was for me. It was the fun part of the fun of it was just catching up with friends. And so I've tried to bring some of that. So I try to respond to everybody who comments. I don't make it to every single last one, but I try to. And I think that people know that there's a real person on the other end,
Yeah.
because I've had the experience, I'm sure you have too, of writing comments and you just crickets and you never hear anything. You feel like you're just shouting into the void. And I don't want people to feel that way. So I try to always make people feel like they're a part of this and it's an ongoing conversation. And then, so going into COVID 2020, we're all just at home with nothing else to
Mm.
do but be on our computers and our phones. And I think for that, that was a real important time for the newsletter for the half marathoner community, because it sort of made us feel connected to something beyond just our houses, and
Yeah.
running was still something we could do. And so that was a lot of fun
Yeah, that's what I was going
in
to
a
say.
terrible time,
It was COVID was a time where running was literally all you could do for a little while. So
Right.
and
Yes,
then going back and talking
exactly.
about it was it was a natural thing to do. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
it made sense. Well, you've kind of answered a little bit of this in what you were just saying there, but I just wondered what you think about what the reactions you get to some of your posts and the writing on Substack generally from yourself and other writers on there and so on. What it sort of tells you about the running community, how close knit it is, but also how we all love to go away after having a run and talk about it all day long as well.
What amazes me is how many different runners there are. So I've met you.
Yeah,
We never would have met, else other except through this newsletter. And like the people I've met who have done the interviews for my newsletter. So people like Tyson, who just a couple of weeks ago, and James in Shanghai, and from Edith Zimmerman to all these other people who have met, never would have met otherwise. But it's interesting to see all the different things that they do. So some of these people are really into ultras, they're into really long distances. Others are just into halves, or there's some people are just walking. Some people, like,
yeah,
they might sign up for my newsletter, but they might I do have that experience of, like, people, like, when I originally signed up for the newsletter, I was running a lot, but I'm not really running so much now, but I still like to stay connected to the newsletter and still read it. And so, like, that's real gratifying to me, that because I mean there's going to come a point, I mean, like, because I'm 55 years old, at some point, I will not do this anymore, or do it less, or do it shorter. I won't be able to do such long distances. And so, but I still love being connected to this, and still love doing it and hearing from people. And I don't know if I'm even answering your question. I do. The running community is so varied. And that's what's really interesting, is it's so varied and different in the interests people have and the places they're able to go. I mean, that's part of it too, has always been appealing to me. Is like, you can go to these amazing places and go running in Alaska, in Paris, in the Dolomites, in Italy. You can go to Antarctica. You can go, all that. That's something that's so cool for me.
yeah. Well, that was one of the other things I was going to mention that you
Mhm.
obviously cover on the newsletter is some of these absolutely incredible races
Mhm.
all around the world. Now, I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, I'm assuming you've not done them all,
No,
but you've
no, no, no,
obviously
no. By a long
done a bit
stretch,
of
no.
research and looked into some incredible races there. Are there any that are like sitting there and you've gone, oh my word, I have to do that one?
Oh gosh, Paris is right up there. There's a part of me that thinks I would love to do Antarctica, but I wonder if it's like
Yeah.
after about 10 minutes, you wouldn't, you'd be kind of done, because it's probably just a barren, icy landscape for 26 miles. There's one where it's in Africa, and it's in Kenya, I think. And there's a series of races that are sort of run on wildlife preserves. I mean, I don't know actually if the entire series is, but there's this one, and I cannot think of the name of it, but I've done a piece on it, and I was like, that would be an amazing place to go.
Yeah.
And because it's like there's wildlife out there on the course when you run. There's one in, I think it's in Virginia, and it's called the Grayson Highlands Run, and they have these wild Shetland ponies that are out on the course,
Right.
believe it or not. And that's a place I would love to run. There's this one in Monument Valley in Utah that looks just so cool. Um, I mean, I sort of can keep going. I mean, I did
Yeah.
do New York City half marathon back in 2010, and that was amazing. That was a ton of fun because we ran through Central Park, we ran through Times Square. That was a tremendous amount of fun. Yeah, I could keep going.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Like you said, there's so many
Mhm.
different races. There's so many different types of races from 5K to 400 miles or whatever. And that is
Yeah,
why
right.
we have so many different types of runners as well, isn't it?
Yes, right, right. And if that's the other thing, oh, I was going to say the ultra, which I haven't done myself. I have a friend who's done them. But that has been, we didn't know any, even when I was starting this website and this newsletter, they were around, but they were not what they are now. And they were, which is
No,
obviously a huge thing. And so many more people are doing these things now, which I don't even think when I first took up running, Woody would have been like, "What are you talking about?"
same.
Running
Yeah,
100 miles
yeah, yeah,
and not sleeping.
yeah. Well, and it's
Yeah,
almost like that's not enough now. It's like
I
people are like, "Well, you got
know.
to run
Yeah,
200 or you got to run 300 over 4 days
right.
or something," and it's like, what's
Yeah,
gone wrong with just doing a 10K?
I know. Be 10K and be done with it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Do you know, I hear this from quite a lot of people though. I think that a lot of people will say that the hardest race they'll do is still the good old humble 5K because you have to go full out for it and it hurts, doesn't it?
right. I did not appreciate that. I didn't run a 5K until after I think I'd run certainly a 10K or even a marathon. And so we did a triathlon one weekend in my hometown, and so we did the 5K. It was like, as part of the event. There was a 5K on Friday night. We went down and ran it, and I did not realize how fast people run these things
Yeah.
because I had only run the longer distance races. And I was like, people are running these things at the top speed. I was like, wow, yeah,
Yeah, no, I love it. I really enjoy it. Like you mentioned Park Run earlier, and I just think it's such an amazing event because you kind of get all manner of runners and abilities and whatever within one
yeah,
event. Everyone's encouraged from the first person who whips round in wow, 16 minutes or some crazy people even
right,
faster to over an hour and your park walkers at the back, and it encapsulates all of those people in this one little event. So it's pretty cool, I think.
it really does.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So tell us about your own running. Where are you with your own running at the moment?
So yeah, so the past few years we had a in-person meetup in 2023 at the Richmond Half Marathon and here in Virginia, and which was fantastic. It was cold, but it was not so cold. And we had about a dozen people show up, which was great and a lot of fun. So that was a half, and then I ran the half again in Athens the following fall. And so then this past year I ran Atlanta 10 miler, and that's the long. And now I've sort of been more, just a little bit more taking it slow. So I'm just running like
Yeah,
2 or 3 times a week right now, just a few miles at a time. And because we got some serious cold here, and I'm a big baby, and so I've got my treadmill. So I run on the treadmill a lot during the winter, and Atlanta's great for like the spring and the fall. Perfect. Summer and winter can get you a little way too hot or way too cold. So that's
well,
what I
listen,
do.
actually, I'm interested in that because tell us what does because in the UK here we'll whinge when it's like two degrees centigrade or
Yeah.
something. Oh, it's really cold. It's nearly freezing, and like people will not come out, or it's raining or something. But I'm guessing for you, because I spoke to another friend of mine in America, and he was talking about something like minus 15 or something. So I'm guessing for you that cold is
Yeah.
properly cold and means a lot more like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. This year we had at least a few weeks when it was in the teens a lot. Now teens Fahrenheit, so I'm
Fahrenheit.
not sure what that
Yeah.
is. That might be below zero
Yeah, I think it would
Celsius.
be. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's too cold for me. I'm inside on my treadmill. And by the same token, like in the summer, it can get easily over 90 degrees Fahrenheit here, and
Yeah.
so that's like no, thank you. Give me like
Um,
60 degrees, 65 degrees.
yeah,
And
that perfect running weather.
yeah, that's what was so great about San Diego is like, it's like you look at the weather throughout the entire year. It's 60, low of 65, high of 75, low of 65, high of 75.
Yeah, oh, that helps you to kind of get into that, get that training going as well, which is so
Exactly.
important, and to get, yeah, get moving. So you know, if you can train in the same temperature that you're going to run in, that makes such a difference
That's
as well,
right.
I think.
So true.
Mm. I'm thinking as well. What I'm quite interested is uh, your love of running that you found through everything that you've done. Does that surprise you now? And what would you say to anybody else who's sort of casually tinkering around the edges and hasn't got quite
Oh,
involved in the cult of running?
that's a great question. I would say it kind of does surprise me. Had I not done this newsletter, there's an excellent chance I would have given up running a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I think the pull of feeling like I spent, especially during COVID, even though we weren't physically together, you felt like I'm part of this community of people who's doing this thing.
Mm.
And we're doing it together and we're training for this longer distance, even though, again, we're not going to run it together. Um, I think there is something about that that keeps you going. And there are certainly people who can keep themselves motivated. There's certainly are. But I would bet 80% of people are not like that. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I think it's much easier to stay motivated and stay consistent when you have that social aspect to it and that community aspect to it. And I think it makes it so much more fun. And so I think yeah, in some ways it does. I'm really glad I have because a lot of people I know are on blood pressure medication and I'm not, you know.
Mm.
So which is pretty good at 55. Um, and so that, and I still like to do it. I still feel great after I go. I still feel the benefits. Um, like I say, I'm sure at some point I won't do it anymore, but I hope to just keep walking and keep doing cardio of some kind,
Yeah.
whether that's cycling, because I do like to bike. I like to bike with my son and we like to bike ride as a family, but so who knows?
Mm.
Yeah.
And and for you, I think it really is that community aspect of it. Not saying
Mhm.
you're not perhaps interested in looking at the elite performances and watching the front runners at New York or Mount London or wherever, but I think
Mhm.
for you, it although that stuff might interest you, that's not what running is necessarily about for you. Is that fair?
That is no, that's completely fair. I mean, I think there a lot of people are interested in that. And it's not like I
Mm.
don't get an ego boost if I have a particularly fast run.
Yeah.
I am vain like everyone else is. But I think for me, I think because I was never like a big time athlete, like we were mentioning as a kid growing up, I never had that expectation like, oh, I'm gonna go and be among the leaders at a race or even among this group, what if this or that group, that I'm always going to be somewhere in the middle of the back of the pack. And that's fine because I'm completing it and I'm doing it. And what I'm doing is so good for me. And so I think like someone like Courtney Dauwalter, who is clearly a incredibly fast runner, but she puts an emphasis on the other aspects of the sport when she talks about it. I think
Yeah.
that's been such an interesting entryway. She's not talking mainly about speed or her time or those kinds of things, and she makes it look like she's enjoying it. And there are some athletes who it looks really difficult for them, and you can find yourself in all of them, but you can't really see yourself as being like them. Like
Yeah.
that's never going to be me. But I can look at Courtney Dauwalter and see, okay, that's somebody I can relate to, even though what she's doing is so much more than I can do or will do. We're still connect on that fun
Mm.
level, personal journey level, breaking through to reflection level.
Yeah. Do you think that's this just popped into my head, so it's not a fully formed theory, but do you think that's an ultra marathon thing where people who run the ultras are perhaps more grounded sounds terrible, like I'm being awful to elite
Yeah,
marathoners or elite half marathoners, but they're perhaps because there's not so much money in that side of the sport, that they're perhaps that little bit more grounded and relatable, even though they're doing extraordinary things.
I very well could be, and it could be just completely the people who self-select for that, or it's not going to be everybody who's going to be say, yes, sign me up for a 200-mile race.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, it could be, it probably does draw, you know, I'm going to use this phrase, and I don't really mean it in a pejorative way, but the oddball in a certain way to you're sort of
Uh,
an exceptional or a outside the norm kind of person. Says
I don't think you'd offend ultra runners by saying that. I know a lot who would refer to themselves in exactly that way. So yeah,
like yeah, who are willing to do that. It is absolutely like, if there's a great movie. Have you seen a documentary on the Barkley marathons in Tennessee, which is like one considered the most difficult foot race in the
yeah,
world?
yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple. The race that eats itself is
Yes,
probably the most
that's
famous.
it. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. I mean, just getting a glimpse into their world and what it must be like is just, yeah.
Yeah, I read something crazy about that, and I'll probably get the figures wrong. So anyone listening, please don't expect these to be 100% accurate. But they were talking about John Kelly, who's obviously completed it at
Mm.
least twice, I think maybe three times. But anyway, they were saying that he normally runs something like a 2:30 or definitely a sub 3 marathon. But when he's doing Barclays, he's running at 23 minute mile pace, which is
Yeah,
you just can't even imagine
right.
that. So that's how hard it is.
Right. And we are only seeing little snippets of it in that documentary. I mean, that
Yeah,
terrain must just be insanely difficult, you know?
yeah, yeah. No, that's one where I think it would be on my bucket list to sort of stand and watch and be in the aid station. But
Yeah.
I'm not
Ulterior
running.
to the
I'm
finish
not running
line. Yeah.
it.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. Terrell, just to finish off, tell us a little bit about people who may not know it, where they can find the half marathoner, and perhaps what you've got coming up.
Sure, sure. Basically, we're on sort of a weekly schedule. So this coming up Friday, we generally have our Friday thread question. So if you have any great ideas, please send them to me. But you can find me at thehalfmarathoner.com, or you can just go Google the half marathoner, and it should be like the first or second result. And that's it. Yeah, that's where you can
Super.
find it.
Brilliant. Oh well, folks, go and check that out. Terrell, thank you so much for joining me on the Running Tales podcast today and telling everyone a little bit about your journey within running and the world of Substack and guides and everything else.
Well, hey, thanks for having me. It's been a blast. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Fantastic. Folks, thank you so much for joining Tara and I today to talk all things running. If you enjoyed our conversation, please like and subscribe Running Tales wherever you have a listen. Give us a review, those always help as well. Check out our Substack page, runningtales.substack.com. It's where we tell written versions of this podcast as well as lots of other people's extraordinary stories. So we will be back again next week with another Running Tale. And once more, thank you so much for joining me today.